Liam Rivers, a 12-year-old boy, was cast out by his stepmother right after his father's funeral. With no goodbyes, no place to turn, Liam sat shivering on the porch of his old home, holding a box containing the last remnants of his life. But when all hope seemed lost, a stranger appeared. Carter Hayes, a millionaire living alone, reached out to help him. Can Liam find light in the darkness? And how will his life change when he meets this man before we dive into the story? Leave a comment below and let me know which city you are watching from. Let's get started. The wind howled through the narrow alleys of Harrington Bay, where the air tasted of salt and regret. The sun, struggling to peek through a thick blanket of clouds, cast long shadows over the rusted boats lining the docks. The town, once a bustling haven for fishermen, now felt more like a forgotten memory, clinging desperately to the past. On a weather-beaten porch, a boy of 12 sat alone, clutching a cardboard box that barely held the remnants of his former life. His name was Liam Rivers, and the house behind him, with its peeling white paint and overgrown garden, was no longer a home. It had been his father's house, his mother's house too, before the accident took her life when he was just a baby. Now, after his father's sudden passing, it belonged to his stepmother, Olivia Rivers, who had made it clear that it was no longer his. Liam's hands trembled as he wiped a tear from his cheek, unsure whether it was from the biting cold or the ache in his chest. He glanced at the box, the last bit of his belongings, a few old t-shirts, a jacket too big for his frame, and a small tattered notebook his mother had once given him, filled with her handwriting. It was all that remained of the family he once knew. But there was nothing left now. His father was gone, and Olivia, his stepmother, had made sure to push him out the moment the funeral ended. Not even the earth had settled on his father's grave before Olivia ordered him to leave. The house had been sold, the belongings packed, and Liam, like an unwanted ghost, was cast into the streets. He had no place to go, no family to turn to, no friends to comfort him. The streetlights flickered weakly, casting a cold, unforgiving glow over the scene. From behind the window of the old house, he could see Olivia moving around inside her silhouette, sharp and detached, as she rearranged the furniture, erasing any trace of his father from the walls. Every movement she made was a reminder of the distance between them. Every step she took was a step farther from him, from the warmth that had once been here. Liam's chest tightened. He knew he had been nothing more than an inconvenience to her. Her life would be easier now without him. No more late-night talks, no more struggles to feed him. It was just her now ready to live a life free of the burden his father's death had placed on her. "Get out!" she had said, her voice cold as steel. "This is my house now, not yours. Don't ever come back." Liam's heart ached at the words. He could still hear them echoing in his mind. He had tried to speak to tell her that this was his home too, that his father had promised he would always have a place here. But the words had caught in his throat. There was no point in arguing. His stepmother had made her decision, and Liam, just a boy of 12, was nothing more than an obstacle to her newfound freedom. He stood up slowly, his legs stiff from sitting on the porch for what felt like hours. The cold wind cut through his thin jacket, and he shivered, unsure of what to do next. His eyes scanned the empty street, searching for some sign, some trace of hope. But there was nothing. Only the sound of distant waves crashing against the rocks, a harsh reminder of the isolation he now felt. He reached into his bag and pulled out the small, frayed notebook. It was his last connection to his mother, the only thing that hadn't been discarded. She had filled it with drawings, poems, and little bits of wisdom, things that had once made him feel safe. He ran his fingers over the pages, tracing the lines of her handwriting, as if trying to capture some piece of her that had been taken away. but the weight of the loss was too much. His mother had been his protector, his constant in a world that was always changing. And now she was gone, leaving only the harsh reality of his stepmother's indifference. A shadow loomed over him. Liam looked up, his heart leaping in his chest. A figure stood in the distance, silhouetted against the dull light of the street lamps. The figure's posture was steady, confident, and Liam instinctively knew it wasn't someone from his life. This was someone new, someone different. As the figure approached, the sound of footsteps grew louder, cutting through the silence of the night. For a moment, Liam wondered if he should get up and leave, walk away into the unknown. But something in the air, the cool breeze, the sound of those approaching footsteps made him stay. The figure drew closer, and Liam could see a tall man, his face lined with age, his expression unreadable. The man wore a heavy coat, and his eyes, though distant, seemed to linger on Liam for a moment longer than necessary. The stranger stopped in front of him, his gaze softening as he took in the boy's worn clothes and the box at his feet. "Are you all right?" The man's voice was deep and steady, carrying the weight of experience. Liam didn't answer immediately. His throat tightened. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words didn't come. Instead, he shook his head slightly, his chest tight with unshed tears. The man seemed to understand. Without another word, he stepped closer, his eyes searching Liam's face for a deeper understanding. "Where are you going, son?" the man asked, his voice carrying the calmness of someone who had seen far too much of the world. Liam opened his mouth to speak, but stopped. He didn't know where he was going. There was no destination, no plan, just an endless road ahead of him, one filled with uncertainty. He didn't have anywhere to go, no one to turn to. He was alone. "I don't know," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible in the cold air. The man nodded slowly as if he had expected that answer. He took a step back, eyeing Liam for a moment before pulling something from his coat pocket. It was a worn leather wallet, the edges frayed from years of use. He pulled out a few bills, enough to last Liam a few days if he was careful. "Take this," the man said, his voice soft yet firm. "You'll need it more than I will." Liam blinked in surprise, unsure of what to say. His instinct was to refuse to tell the man he didn't need charity, but something in the man's eyes made him hesitate. This wasn't pity. This wasn't the kind of charity Liam had known before. This was something different, something kind. "I'm Carter Hayes," the man said, as if reading Liam's thoughts. "I used to live here. I've seen your face around." Liam looked up at him, still unsure. Carter Hayes. The name didn't ring a bell, but the man's steady gaze and quiet strength gave Liam a sense of safety he hadn't felt in a long time. "You don't have to go alone," Carter added gently. "Come with me. I have a place and you can stay there for a while, just until you figure things out." The offer was simple, but it was all Liam needed to hear. For the first time that night, a small spark of hope flickered in his chest. He wasn't alone. Not yet. Liam nodded, his throat still tight with emotion. "Thank you," he whispered, almost too quietly for Carter to hear. Without another word, Carter Hayes reached out and placed a hand on Liam's shoulder, giving him a reassuring squeeze. It was a gesture of kindness, and in that moment, Liam knew that his life, broken as it was, had just taken a turn for the better. The two of them walked down the street together, the lights of Harrington Bay casting long shadows behind them. For Liam, the future was uncertain, but at least for now, he wasn't alone. And that, he realized, was more than he had ever expected to find on that cold, lonely porch. And so the story began. Liam followed Carter through the quiet streets of Harrington Bay, his thoughts swirling like the cold wind around them. He couldn't help but glance back at the house, The house that had once been home, the place where his mother had lived, and laughed and loved him. Now it was just a shell emptied of warmth, filled only with the shadow of his stepmother's cruelty. As the dim glow of the streetlights grew fainter behind them, Liam realized that he was leaving that part of his life behind. A part of him felt like he was abandoning his father's memory, but another part, a stronger, quieter part, knew he couldn't stay in that place any longer. Not under Olivia's rule. Not in the cold, suffocating silence that had replaced the laughter and the love that had once filled the house. The truth, painful as it was that it hadn't felt like home for a long time. Carter's house, however, was something different. It wasn't warm and inviting in the way a family home might be, but it had a sense of quiet dignity about it. The exterior was modest but well kept, a sharp contrast to the dilapidated homes of Harrington Bay's forgotten streets. The old wooden steps creaked slightly as they approached the door, but there was something solid, something trustworthy about the place. Carter opened the door without hesitation, as though he were used to welcoming others in, though Liam knew this was likely not the case. The man had been a recluse for years, known in town for his wealth and his quiet life, but little else. Liam hadn't even known him by name until now. Still, there was something in the way Carter had looked at him, something in his eyes that suggested he wasn't just offering a place to stay out of kindness alone. He was offering a chance at something more, a chance to heal, to rebuild, to move forward. Liam felt the weight of it press against him as much as he didn't want to admit that he needed it. Inside the house smelled faintly of pine and old books, a comforting, earthy scent that wrapped around Liam like a blanket. The walls were lined with shelves full of books, their spines worn and well-loved, and the furniture, though sparse, was functional and warm. There was no sign of excess, no grand displays of wealth or luxury. Instead, there was something raw and honest about the place, a quiet space where time seemed to slow down, and the world outside could be forgotten for a little while. Carter led Liam into a small sitting room with a cracked leather armchair by the fireplace. The fire was already burning low, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The soft glow of the flames danced in Carter's eyes as he gestured for Liam to take a seat. "Make yourself at home." Carter set his voice soft yet firm in its calmness. He turned to leave for a moment, his footsteps light on the wooden floor, and Liam watched him as he disappeared into what must have been the kitchen. Liam sat down in the chair, the leather creaking under his weight, and let out a long breath. He wasn't sure what to expect from this new arrangement, but he knew one thing for certain. This was a far cry from the cold, oppressive atmosphere that had marked the final days of his life with Olivia. The quiet in this house was different. It felt safe, and it made Liam's chest feel just a little less tight. Carter returned shortly carrying a tray with a steaming mug of hot chocolate and a plate of bread with butter. He set it down on the table beside Liam and sat across from him, folding his hands in his lap, his eyes thoughtful, as though weighing his words before speaking. "I know it's not much." Carter set his voice low, "but it's all I can offer right now. You're welcome to stay here for as long as you need. I'll make sure you have everything you need, food, clothes, whatever you need to get by. But more than that, Liam, I'm here to help you find a way forward. I know this town, and I know people who can help you get things set up, school, a job, whatever it is you want to do. But I want you to know something. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Right now, you just need to rest. You've been through enough already." Liam took the mug of hot chocolate and held it in his hands, feeling the warmth seep into his chilled fingers. He took a tentative sip, the sweetness of the chocolate mingling with the warmth of the mug, and let the heat spread through him. For a brief moment, it felt like something familiar, something safe. He hadn't realized how much he had needed this simple kindness, this offer of something that felt like hope. Carter's words settled over him, heavy but gentle, and for the first time in a long while, Liam felt something other than fear and anger. He felt cared for. And that feeling, as fleeting and fragile as it was, began to crack through the ice around his heart. But then, as he placed the mug back on the table, the reality of his situation hit him again. Olivia's harsh words echoed in his mind, the finality of her dismissal reverberating like a death sentence. "This house is mine now," she had said. "You're not allowed to stay here." Liam clenched his jaw, his stomach twisting at the memory. He couldn't shake the feeling of being discarded, of being told he wasn't worth anything. He had been his father's son, his mother's son, but now it seemed he wasn't even Olivia's problem anymore. She had moved on with ease, and he had been left in the dust. Liam looked at Carter, who was still watching him with an expression that was impossible to read. There was something in the man's eyes, a quiet understanding that made Liam want to say everything that had been building inside him for weeks, months, even years. But the words didn't come. Instead, there was only a quiet ache, a yearning for something he wasn't sure he could have. A family. The word felt foreign on his tongue, like a dream he had long since given up on. Carter seemed to sense Liam's internal struggle. He leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, and his voice softened. "I'm not asking you to forget everything that happened," he said gently. "You've been through a lot. And I'm sure you've wondered why people can be so cold, so cruel. I can't tell you the answers, but I can tell you this. You don't have to be alone in this. Not anymore. I'm here. I'll help you rebuild your life. You're not just a stranger here, Liam. You're someone who deserves more than what you've been given." Liam's eyes stung, and he quickly looked down, blinking back the tears that had threatened to fall. He hadn't realized how badly he needed someone to say those words. To say that he was worth something, even if it was just in this small moment. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel completely alone. "I don't know how to start over," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't even know what to do." Carter smiled, a small, understanding smile. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. You take it one step at a time. Rest here tonight, and tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next. There's no rush. You've got time, Liam. You've got a chance to do something different. And that's all any of us can ask for." The weight of his words settled over Liam like a warm blanket, and for the first time in a long while, Liam felt the tension in his shoulders begin to loosen. Maybe there was a way out of the darkness. Maybe he could begin again. But tonight, he would rest. Tonight he would take Carter's words to heart, and for once he wouldn't have to carry the world on his shoulders alone. As the fire crackled in the hearth, the night outside growing colder, Liam closed his eyes and let the warmth of the house sink in. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't have to be afraid. And that in itself was the beginning of something new. The days that followed felt like an endless blur of firsts for Liam. Each morning he woke to the warmth of Carter's home, the steady crackle of the fireplace filling the silence as the town slowly began to stir outside. The rhythm of life was quieter here, less frantic, and Liam found it strangely comforting. Carter, though a man of few words, had a way of making things feel steady, as if everything, no matter how broken it seemed, could be put back together with time. For the first time in his life, Liam had a sense of routine, of belonging. Every evening after dinner they would sit in the small living room, the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and hot tea, and talk about little things. Sometimes Carter would share stories from his youth stories about the people who used to live in Harrington Bay, about how the town once bustled with life before the decline. Other times it was just the two of them sitting in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that wasn't oppressive. but peaceful. In these moments, Liam allowed himself to think that maybe he could start over. Yet, as the days passed, the shadows of his past refused to loosen their grip on him. Olivia's words still echoed in his mind, sharp and unforgiving. "This house is mine now. You're not allowed to stay here. Don't follow me." Her voice had been so cold, so final, and Liam had carried the weight of that rejection with him like a chain around his heart. He still couldn't shake the feeling of being discarded, of having no place in the world that could truly be called his own. It wasn't just the house or the things that had been left behind. It was the feeling that his life had been determined by everyone around him but him. He had never truly had a say in what happened to him, in what he became. His father had been absent in life, and now in death his presence was merely a reminder of everything that Liam could never fully understand. His stepmother, too, had claimed that she was in control, that she could decide his fate without question. But here with Carter, things were different. Here, for the first time in years, Liam felt as though his fate wasn't entirely out of his hands. But still, every time he tried to think about what might come next, the weight of the future pressed down on him, and his thoughts turned darker. Carter had been kind to him, offering him food, shelter, and the promise of a new start. But what did that really mean? What could he possibly do now? "You don't have to figure it all out right now," Carter had said. "Rest here tonight, and tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next." Yet how could he rest when he felt like everything was hanging by a thread? Every corner of the town felt suffocating, each street a reminder of what he had lost, what he had been forced to leave behind. Carter's house, for all its warmth, was still a temporary place, a stopgap. He wasn't ready to accept that his past was gone, but he wasn't sure how to move forward either. What was left for him here? What could a boy like him, with nothing but pain and memories of a fractured family, hope for one crisp morning as the sun began to rise, casting a soft golden light across the town? Carter sat Liam down at the kitchen table. The old wood creaked beneath them as the kettle whistled on the stove, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. The soft glow of the morning light painted the kitchen in hues of amber and gold, and for a moment Liam felt something like peace, as if the weight in his chest might finally begin to lighten. "You've been here for a few days now," Carter said gently, his voice as steady as ever. "I can see it in your eyes, Liam. You're not here just for shelter. You're here because you need something more than a roof over your head. You need a chance to figure out who you are now, and I want to help you find that." Liam sat silently, his fingers curling around the warm mug of coffee in front of him. It wasn't the first time Carter had mentioned this, but hearing it now in the quiet calm of the morning made it feel more real. Who was he now? What was he supposed to become? He had never had a say in his life before. His father had been a ghost, his stepmother a constant reminder of his second-class status. He had always been the boy in the background, the one who didn't matter. But here in this small kitchen with Carter's unwavering gaze on him, Liam couldn't help but wonder if this was his chance to define himself. "I don't know how to be anything but the boy I've been." Liam muttered, his voice small. "I don't know how to change that. I don't even know where to start." Carter nodded, understanding more than Liam expected. He sat back in his chair, his hands resting on the edge of the table as he considered Liam's words. "You don't have to change who you are," Carter said, his voice calm but firm. "You just need to start with what you want." "What do you want to do, Liam? Do you want to stay here? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to learn a trade? Maybe work for the town? Whatever it is, I can help you take that first step. But you need to decide what you want for yourself." Liam stared into his coffee, the dark liquid swirling in the cup. He wanted to say that he didn't care, that it didn't matter. But that wasn't true. Deep down, he realized that it mattered more than anything. He didn't want to be the boy who had been abandoned, the one who had no future. He didn't want to live in a shadow anymore. But how did you even begin to take that first step when everything had been taken from you? I don't know what I want. Liam admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what's possible for me. I've never had a chance to think about it before. All I ever knew was surviving, just trying to get by. Carter reached across the table, his hand resting on Liam's. The gesture was simple, but it was enough to quiet the storm in Liam's chest. Carter's eyes met his, and for a moment there was only silence between them, a silence filled with understanding, with compassion. Then, let's take it slow, Carter said softly. We'll figure it out together. You don't have to have all the answers right now. But I'm here and I won't let you slip away, I promise you that. Liam nodded, feeling the smallest flicker of hope spark inside him. It wasn't a big hope, not yet. But it was a beginning. For the first time in what felt like forever, Liam allowed himself to imagine a future. Not one defined by rejection and loss, but one where he might have the power to choose. It was a terrifying thought, but at the same time it was the most freeing thing he had ever felt. The thought that perhaps he wasn't doomed to follow the path others had set for him. Over the next few weeks, Carter helped Liam take the first steps toward rebuilding his life. He enrolled Liam in the local school, where the teachers were kind but firm, determined to help him catch up on the lessons he had missed during his time in limbo. Carter also introduced him to some of the town's older residents, men and women who had lived through the rise and fall of Harrington Bay, who had seen the boom and bust of the town's fishery. Liam learned to fish slowly, but surely under the watchful eye of an old fisherman named Hank, who had once worked alongside his father. Every day felt like a new beginning, a series of small victories, and with each one, Liam felt a little more whole, a little more certain of who he could become. He wasn't defined by his father's death or by Olivia's cruelty. He wasn't even defined by his past mistakes or the fears that had held him back. He was simply Liam, and that was enough. It wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of his past would come crashing down, when the fear of losing everything again would creep in like an old, familiar shadow. But Carter was always there, a constant presence in his life, guiding him, reassuring him. And slowly Liam learned that he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. And for the first time, he believed that the future held more for him than he could have ever imagined. As the weeks turned into months, Liam began to feel a sense of grounding that he had never known before. The town of Harrington Bay, once a place of isolation and dread, had slowly begun to transform in his eyes. The sharpness of his past, his father's death, his mother's absence, and the cruelty of his stepmother had softened with the passage of time, replaced by the steady rhythm of daily life. Every morning he woke to the sound of birds calling through the trees outside Carter's home, their calls ringing clear through the quiet town. The house, though small and modest, felt more like a home with each passing day. Carter had given him more than just shelter. He had given him the chance to find himself again, to rebuild what had been broken. Liam's fingers, once frozen from the pain of loss, had begun to stretch open, allowing the warmth of trust and new beginnings to fill the spaces that had been empty for so long. In the mornings, he worked alongside Carter, helping him with small repairs around the house or tending to the garden. Carter, who had once lived a life full of business meetings and busy schedules, now took great pleasure in the simple, slow tasks of tending to a home. His hands were calloused, weathered by years of work, but there was a grace in the way he moved, a quiet confidence that came from knowing the value of a steady hand. Liam watched him often, trying to understand the way Carter seemed to always know the right thing to do, the right thing to say. There was wisdom in his stillness, and Liam, for the first time, found himself not just learning how to survive, but learning how to live with intention. On afternoons when the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the town, Carter would take Liam to the docks to fish. The quiet of the water, the rhythmic sound of the waves lapping against the side of the boat, and the stillness of the air gave Liam a sense of peace he had never felt before. The old fisherman Hank, who had once worked with his father, had taken him under his wing, teaching him the art of fishing with patience and care. Liam, at first hesitant, had found himself surprisingly skilled at it. It was as if the water held some sort of secret rhythm that only he could understand. The way the line would drift just beneath the surface, waiting for a tug, reminded him of his own waiting, of how he had been stuck in limbo, unable to move forward. Fishing became more than just a task. It was a meditation, a way for Liam to find balance in his life, to learn the art of waiting without fear. But it wasn't just fishing that was teaching him. It was the conversations he had with Carter, the long talks they would have late into the night after the fire had been lit, and the house had settled into a comfortable silence. Carter had begun to open up to him, more telling stories of his own past, of the life he had led, before he had retreated to Harrington Bay. He had once been a wealthy businessman, a man known for his sharp mind and ruthless decisions. He had built empires, made millions, but it had cost him everything. His wife had left him, taking their daughter with her, and he had been left with nothing but empty rooms and memories of a life that felt increasingly distant. The loneliness had driven him to retreat, to seek solace in isolation, but over time he had come to understand something profound. Success was fleeting, but the simple joys of life, family friendship, and the quiet moments shared between two people were what truly mattered. I spent so many years chasing things I didn't need. Carter confessed one night, his voice soft but heavy with regret. I thought that if I had enough money, enough status, enough power, I could fill the emptiness inside. But it never worked. It wasn't until I lost everything that I realized what I really needed wasn't outside of me. It was right here. He gestured around the room, his eyes landing on Liam. It was connection. It was love. It was finding something to hold on to when everything else falls away. Liam listened carefully, the weight of Carter's words sinking deep into his chest. He had always believed that life was about surviving, about getting by, about pushing through the pain. But now, in the warmth of the firelight, with Carter's words hanging in the air, he began to wonder if maybe there was more to it. Maybe life wasn't just about enduring. Maybe it was about living in the moments that made up the days, about finding meaning in the simple things, the quiet mornings, the evening talks, the laughter that filled the house on those rare nights when Carter's stories brought a smile to Liam's face. Yet, even with the peace that had begun to settle into his life, there was still something gnawing at Liam's insides. The town of Harrington Bay, once a place of nothing but darkness and abandonment, had started to feel like a place he could belong. But the shadow of his past still loomed over him. Olivia, though gone from his life, was never far from his thoughts. He hadn't seen her since the day she had kicked him out of the house, but the fear of her cruelty still hung in the back of his mind. The feeling of being unwanted, of being nothing more than a burden, clung to him like a second skin. Every time he looked at Carter, he saw kindness in his eyes. But there was a small nagging part of Liam that still wondered how long that kindness would last. How long before Carter would see him as another problem to fix another person who was too much to handle. It was during one of their fishing trips, a bright Saturday morning with a soft breeze sweeping across the water, that Liam finally found the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind for so long. They were drifting slowly along the edge of the bay, the boat rocking gently, and Liam, who had been quiet for most of the morning, turned to Carter. "Do you think," Liam began hesitantly, his voice barely above a whisper, "that I'm just a burden to you? I mean, I know you've done a lot for me, but I don't want to be someone who just takes from you. I don't want to be the problem you have to fix." Carter didn't look at him at first. His gaze focused on the horizon, but Liam could see the subtle shift in his posture. The weight of his words had landed with the force of a storm. But Carter's response came slowly, like the calm after the chaos. "You're not a burden," Liam Carter said, his voice steady but firm. "You've never been a burden. I'm not helping you because I feel sorry for you or because I think I owe you something. I'm helping you because I care, and because I believe in you. I know you don't have to be perfect, and I don't expect you to be. I just want you to know that you're not alone. Not anymore." Liam felt the words wash over him, their warmth sinking into the deepest parts of his heart. He hadn't realized how much he had needed to hear them until now, and as Carter's steady gaze met his, something inside him shifted. The fear that had been holding him back, the fear of being abandoned, of being rejected, began to loosen its grip. For the first time, he realized that he wasn't just a boy being tolerated by someone who had to take him in. He was someone worthy of kindness, of care. He was someone who had a place in the world, a place that was his own, and a future that could be his to shape. As the boat drifted silently across the water, the sun rising higher in the sky, Liam felt a sense of peace settle over him. The shadows of his past were still there, lurking at the edges of his mind, but they no longer had the power to control him. The future, with all its uncertainty, no longer felt like a weight he had to carry alone. It was something he could face, something he could work toward, one step at a time. And with Carter by his side, he no longer feared the unknown. He knew now that he had the strength to shape his own destiny, and that was all he needed to begin again. The road ahead would be long, but it was his to walk. And for the first time in his life, Liam knew that he wasn't walking it alone. As the weeks blurred into months, the steady hum of everyday life in Harrington Bay began to carry a weight of its own, one that Liam had never experienced before. It wasn't the weight of fear or uncertainty, or even the oppressive sadness that had once defined his life. It was a weight that came from growth, from realizing that he had the power to shape his future. He had learned how to stand on his own 2 feet, how to fish, how to work the land with Carter, how to find peace in a town that had once felt like an enemy. But the most important lesson, the one that had taken root deep inside him, was the realization that his past didn't have to define his future. Each morning when Liam woke up, he no longer felt the gnawing ache of emptiness that had once plagued him. Instead, there was a sense of possibility that had begun to fill the spaces where fear had once lived. It wasn't just the house that had changed, it was him. The quiet house where Carter lived had become a sanctuary, a place where Liam could breathe, a place where he was no longer just surviving, but living. And yet, despite the newfound sense of belonging, there was still an undeniable emptiness that lingered. The ghosts of his past, his mother, his father, and the toxic weight of Olivia's cruelty were never far from his thoughts. They were the shadow in the corner of his mind, the voices that whispered, when the night grew too quiet, reminding him of the life he had left behind. But they no longer held the power to control him. Not entirely. It was late one afternoon, as the golden light of the setting sun bathed the town in warmth, that the next chapter of Liam's journey began to unfold. Carter had been unusually quiet all day, his thoughts seemingly distant. He had mentioned something about needing to visit the town's old library to meet with an acquaintance, and Liam, curious as ever, decided to go with him. The walk to the library, along the worn, cobbled streets, and past the crumbling buildings was familiar by now, though the sharpness of Liam's memories still haunted him as they passed the once vibrant streets that had now been abandoned, forgotten by time. The walk was silent, save for the sound of their shoes tapping against the cracked pavement. But in the silence, Liam couldn't help but feel a strange sense of anticipation, a quiet electricity hanging in the air, an unspoken awareness that something important was on the horizon. When they reached the library, Carter greeted the librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Forsyth, with a nod, and Liam followed them into the dimly lit building. It was cool inside the air, heavy with the smell of dust and old paper. The kind of smell that could only be found in a place like this, a place that had lived through countless years, holding its secrets within its walls. Liam watched as Carter spoke with Mrs. Forsyth in hushed tones, their conversation slipping past him like whispers in the wind. He was left to wander the aisles of books, tracing his fingers along the spines of forgotten stories, wondering where the path in front of him might lead. It wasn't until he heard the sound of footsteps approaching that he turned around. A figure emerged from the shadows of one of the back aisles, tall with a weathered face that bore the weight of years lived in the quiet corners of the world. The man's eyes, sharp but kind, met Liam's, and for a moment he felt as though he were looking into the face of someone who understood the weight of loss, of abandonment, of finding your way in the world after everything had been ripped from you. The man walked towards him with purpose, his expression unreadable. "Liam Rivers," the man said, his voice low and steady. "You've grown, haven't you?" The words were not spoken with judgment, but with a quiet acknowledgement, as if the man had been waiting for Liam's arrival long before the boy had even realized it. Liam blinked, unsure of what to say, unsure of who this man was, or how he knew his name. But something about the man's presence, the way he spoke, felt strangely familiar. There was an unspoken recognition, a shared history that made Liam's heart race with a mixture of hope and dread. "Who are you?" Liam asked, his voice small, almost a whisper. The man paused for a moment, studying him with a knowing look in his eyes. "My name is Thomas Ellis," he said, his tone matter-of-fact, as though the name itself carried its own weight. "I knew your father." Liam felt a jolt run through him, a rush of emotions flooding his chest. Thomas Ellis. The name echoed in his mind like a distant bell ringing across a vast emptiness. His father had spoken of him, though the details had always been vague. He had been a friend, a former business partner, someone who had once been a part of his father's life, before everything had fallen apart. But Liam hadn't expected to meet him. Not like this, not after all these years. Thomas Ellis studied Liam for a long moment, as though searching for something within him. His eyes softened, and he took a step closer. "I've been meaning to speak with you," he continued, his voice quieter, now tinged with regret. "I've been following your journey here in Harrington Bay. Carter and I have talked. I know what you've been through, Liam, and I know what you're capable of." Liam swallowed hard, his throat tight with emotion. He didn't know what to say, or even how to process what was happening. He had never imagined that someone like Thomas Ellis, a man who had been a part of his father's life, would be standing in front of him now, offering him some sort of explanation, some sort of connection to the past that had been so violently ripped from him. "I don't understand," Liam muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "Why now? Why, after all these years, my father? He's gone. I don't have anyone left." Thomas Ellis looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and understanding. "Your father made mistakes," he said softly. "But he was a good man, Liam. And I want to make things right for you. I've left something for you, something that belongs to you by right. It's time you knew the truth about your father, and about the family that you've never truly had the chance to know." Liam's heart raced as Thomas handed him a small, leather-bound notebook. His hands trembled as he took it, the weight of it heavier than anything he had ever held before. It was his father's journal, the pages worn with age, the handwriting a mixture of hope and despair, of dreams and regrets. As he opened it, his father's words began to spill across the pages, words that Liam had never known existed, words that painted a picture of the man he had never fully understood. In that moment, something clicked deep inside Liam. This was his legacy, his father's story, and it was more than he had ever imagined. He wasn't just a boy abandoned by the world, He was someone who had a history, who had roots, and those roots ran deeper than the pain that had tried to define him. His father, despite his mistakes, had loved him in his own way, had left him something that could connect him to a past that was more complicated, more beautiful than Liam had ever realized. Thomas Ellis watched him closely as Liam began to read, and for the first time, Liam felt the weight of the past lift, if only slightly. This was the beginning of something new, a new understanding, a new relationship with the father he had lost. There was still so much left unsaid, so much to uncover. But in this moment, Liam knew one thing: he wasn't alone. He never had been. As the sun set outside the library, casting long shadows across the town, Liam closed the notebook and looked up at Thomas Ellis. The road ahead was still uncertain, still filled with the unknown, but for the first time, Liam felt a sense of peace. His past was complicated, tangled with loss and sorrow, but it was also filled with a legacy that could be his to rebuild. Thomas Ellis smiled at him, a quiet nod of approval. "You'll find your way, Liam. You already have." Liam stepped outside, the cool evening air filling his lungs, and for the first time he didn't feel the crushing weight of the past. He felt something else: hope. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was living. And whatever came next, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on with the knowledge that he was no longer alone. The story didn't end there. In fact, it was only just beginning. The story of Liam Rivers teaches us that the journey to healing and self-discovery is never linear, and it is often shaped by the kindness and support of others. The most profound lesson from Liam's journey is that no matter how lost or abandoned we may feel, it is never too late to rebuild, to start anew, and to find our place in the world. Life often presents us with challenges that test our strength and resilience, loss, betrayal, and the painful journey of navigating a broken past. Yet through Liam's experiences, we learn that our past does not have to define us. The people we meet, the choices we make, and the way we approach life in the present moment are what truly shape our future. Liam's path to healing begins when he accepts help and allows himself to trust others. When he meets Carter, the millionaire, who offers him not just a roof over his head, but a chance at a new life, Liam slowly learns the power of opening himself up to connection and love. Similarly, when Thomas Ellis steps into his life with the truth about his father, Liam begins to understand the importance of knowing who we are, where we come from, and the legacy we carry with us. We too can embrace the lesson that our stories are not finished until we choose to stop writing them. Just like Liam, we have the power to take the steps necessary to create a new narrative, one where we are not victims of our circumstances, but active participants in our own healing and growth. Practical advice that we can take from Liam's story is this: don't shy away from seeking help when you need it. Whether it's through a mentor, a friend, or even someone you've just met, like Carter, you don't have to face life's hardships alone. There's strength in vulnerability, and it's often through others that we can find the courage to face our deepest fears and uncertainties. It's also essential to remember that healing takes time, and there's no shame in allowing yourself to rest and rebuild. Start small. Take it one step at a time, and know that it's okay to ask for support when necessary. The road to healing is gradual, but it's worth every step. Finally, I want to call on all of us to take a moment to reflect on the relationships in our own lives. Just as Carter made a difference in Liam's life, we can be that kind of presence for someone else. Whether it's offering a listening ear, a helping hand, or simply being there in someone's time of need, We have the power to change lives. Reach out to someone who may need your support, whether they're going through a personal struggle or just need a moment of kindness. It costs nothing but could mean everything to someone else. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Liam's story. I hope it inspires you to embrace your own potential for growth, to extend compassion to those around you, and to never lose sight of the power of change. Every step you take toward healing, toward connection, is a step toward a better tomorrow. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, you're not alone.